Absolutely no one predicted Mercedes' performance at the Spanish Grand Prix last weekend. Their new upgrades clearly did the work required and improved the car a massive amount. Or so it seems anyway. Overhauling their entire car can't have been cheap though, and there is a lot of speculation about whether or not they will breach the cost cap due to the huge amount of work they've done. Today we're going to look at the Mercedes Spanish Grand Prix and try to work out if it was as good as it seems. Then we'll talk about the cost cap allegations against Mercedes, and how, no matter how much they upgrade their car, they won't get punished. So don't go anywhere. Mercedes may have bought their upgrades to Monaco, but the real test was always going to be the Circuit de Barcelona-Catalunya. In Monaco, things really didn't improve and the car looked pretty similar to how it did before the new side pods were fitted. Perhaps that is an indication that the changes to the car have done nothing to improve it at low speed, but we'll come back to that later. In Sunday's race in Spain though, it was clear that the car had improved. Mercedes' race pace was significantly better than it had been, and the feedback from the drivers was very positive. In qualifying, it was a different story. George Russell couldn't make it out of Q2, and Lewis Hamilton's fifth was pretty in line with where he had been qualifying all season, indicating that their one-lap pace maybe hasn't improved relative to the rest of the field. The real goal this season for every team though is to close the gap to Red Bull. Did they manage that in Spain? Let's have a look. Mercedes' average gap to the winning Red Bull so far this season has been 39.056 seconds. That figure ignores Australia due to the late red flag negating differences in race pace. In Spain, Lewis was just 24.09 seconds behind Verstappen across the line, and despite starting in 12th, George Russell managed to finish third and 32.389 seconds behind Max. If we look at the difference between that average finishing deficit of 39.056 seconds and the 24.09 seconds that Lewis finished behind Max, across the 66 laps of the Spanish Grand Prix, Mercedes reduced their deficit by 0.227 seconds a lap, which is a commendable improvement. Lewis was still 0.365 seconds a lap slower than Max though, so there is a long way to go, and closing the rest of that gap is going to increase Mercedes' already massive development bill. There are other advantages to Mercedes' upgrades though. Team boss Toto Wolff said that as well as the performance progress it has experienced from the car changes, of more significance are the answers about just where it needs to pursue added pace now. "I think it's solid," he said about the current state of the W14. "I think we should have been right behind Max Verstappen, and this is what we've seen after FP3, where we felt we had something in the bag. And that's why the disappointment is big, because we expected more. But I think it is a new baseline. It is from where we can continue to work with a certain stability and without needing to question certain parts of the car, whether it's the bodywork, the floor or the front suspension. It is now established and this is what we're taking forward now." Russell and Hamilton used their superior tyre management during the race, which allowed them to avoid the hard tyre on their two-stopper to defeat Ferrari's Carlos Sainz, who dropped from 2nd to 5th, and the Aston Martins. According to Russell, Mercedes' double podium shows that the Brackley team is finally on the right track, after introducing comprehensive upgrades in Monaco, which were further exploited at the more traditional Barcelona layout. "I'm a little surprised for sure," said Russell. "Kudos to the team for giving me a really great car today. A strong race from us as well from P12 coming all the way to P3. A sign of things to come hopefully for us as a team." As good as Mercedes' weekend was in Spain though, is this actually a false dawn? Or is this a real indication of the team's improvements? So far this season, Mercedes have been pretty comfortable picking up maximum points outside of the podium positions, with only Sergio Perez and Fernando Alonso regularly beating them. The track in Spain was very clearly not suited to the Aston Martins, as both drivers struggled with tyre wear, so perhaps Canada will be a better opportunity to examine how the battle between the two is going. Alright, let's talk about the cost cap and the risk Mercedes are running by upgrading their car so much. Mercedes' changes to their car were massive, basically a completely new spec. The cost of that doesn't just include the production of those parts, it is the massive amount of testing they did back in the factory as well. All of that adds up, and when they are limited to spending $135 million within the budget cap, that should limit the team's ability to upgrade their car for the rest of the season. Christian Horner is a man that knows a lot about breaching the cost cap, as his Red Bull team are the only ones to have been punished for it so far. Horner is now using his experience in issuing a warning to Wolff. The 49-year-old feels that Mercedes have already spent a lot on upgrades they bought to Barcelona. This means that they're close to breaching the cap, which is why Horner isn't worried about Wolff bringing more upgrades for Hamilton and Russell in the coming races. So obviously they bought a significant amount of parts, so they've obviously committed a significant part of their budget cap to this upgrade, and it's up to the team how and when it applies, said Horner. He was also asked for his thoughts on the upgrades that Mercedes had bought. Well, to be honest, I haven't had an in-depth look at the upgrades, he said. Obviously, visually they look a bit different, but sometimes the visual things actually have the least performance impact. It's what's usually underneath the skin or the finer detail that has the biggest impact. Teams breaching the cost cap is a big worry. The financial reports for last season were submitted just over a month ago now, and the FIA's findings are expected at some point over the summer break. It has been theorized that as many as 6 teams could have breached the cap last season, and F1 CEO Stefano Domenicali is worried. I'm more than nervous. I'm pretty sure that now everyone understands what the effects of a breach are, and I totally agree that the focus on this aspect will be very big. I think it's a point of attention, especially for credibility, and to check if everyone respects this rule, but it has to be done sooner rather than later, the former Ferrari boss explained. While last year, teams could blame inflation and the spiraling supply line costs and energy costs due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the war in Ukraine, this season they can't use that same excuse, if you want to call it that. If Mercedes continue to try and upgrade their car at a normal pace, they will definitely end up over the budget cap. Or they would if it wasn't for a convenient loophole that Mercedes have been abusing. Alpine Formula 1 team principal Otmar Safnauer has said teams could exploit a loophole to carry out development work outside the sport's budget cap. Last year, F1 teams took months to agree a deal to increase the cap in response to rising inflation. Alpine was one of the teams which opposed those changes, and Safnauer believes the differences in how teams are structured has the potential to seriously undermine the intention behind the cap, which was to prevent some teams outspending their rivals. All those inflation bonus things, although we vetoed them, I think those are marginally adding to the cap, not massively, he told the media. But when you look at corporate structures, that is massive. If you only have 68, 70 people in the racing team, and the rest of the 900 are outside of it and apportioning costs, that's the kind of stuff we have to worry about. Some teams have dedicated technology divisions where they apply developments from their F1 program to other industries. Safnauer is concerned about how transfer of knowledge back from those divisions to an F1 operation is treated within the cap. If you have a great F1 idea because you're working on something else, how do you account for the stuff that you thought of when you were working on something else? That's just an idea. But if you take that even further, it could be other things. Developing tools, for example, for a boat, but that tool then applies to F1, and you spent loads of investment on developing the tool, and then you largely account for it in F1. That boat comment is very specifically aimed at Mercedes, who moved James Allison, one of the highest paid team members, onto the Ineos Americas Cup team to help cover his wages. He was still working for the Mercedes Formula 1 team, but just part-time. Mercedes really don't have to worry about the cost cap in the same way that teams like Haas do, because they can just outsource all of their labour to different Mercedes-affiliated companies. So even with Mercedes making a B-spec car, and probably continuing to upgrade their car throughout the season, they won't have to worry about breaching the cap due to this loophole. Not really in the spirit of the rules, is it? What do you think of Mercedes' performance in Spain? And will they get caught by the budget cap, or will this loophole keep them safe? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and until next time, drive safe and bye for now.